Welcome back to Get Down to Business, the show all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. Speaking of entrepreneurship, that is exactly the topic that we'll be discussing in our next conversation. And I love to bring on subject matter experts, and that's exactly what Paige Hulse is. Paige is an attorney and business owner who focuses on bridging the gap between creative business owners and the legal world. Often those two things can't coexist. So Paige, welcome to Get Down to Business. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So I love to get to know the person behind the microphone. I know that you have an interesting background of sort of following a pretty conventional litigator route, but you caught the entrepreneurial bug. Tell us how that story developed.
I did. I don't think there are many people out there that can trace a direct line from working as an oil and gas litigator to then working with wedding professionals, but that's exactly what happened to me. So I started my career as, like I said, an oil and gas litigator. I got into it not necessarily because I loved oil and gas, but because I loved the entrepreneurial spirit that a lot of my clients had. Come from an entrepreneur background of a family myself. To make a very long story short, the more that I started working with my clients and actually was working in the courtroom day in and day out, I needed a creative outlet. Just so happened to be the same time of life that most of my friends were getting married. And I ended up working with helping negotiate quite a few contracts through that process and realized that there was a pretty big hole in the market in terms of legal support for people that are specialized in the creative industry. So in 2017, I left the firm and started my own practice to fill that hole.
Paige Hulse Law, and certainly you know how to bridge that gap, as we just said a moment ago. So, now that we've got that background, then, and certainly our listeners know that you can relate to what a new business owner goes through. I'll ask you that question. You know, we're still in early 2022. Lots of people that are fired up with new entrepreneurial ideas. What do they need to know about establishing their corporate entity?
The very first thing that I tell all of my clients, no matter once you're selling anything, let's just say over a $400 mark, once you're selling any goods or services, you need to start looking at getting your formation in place. So we want an entity. We want to separate our personal assets and liability from our business assets and liability. So for example, if you think of whatever example you want to, but if you were to get in trouble from a business aspect, you don't want to end up in court and be in a position where a judge can make you liquidate your house and your car to satisfy a judgment. We want to keep our personal lives and our business lives completely separate in every way. The easiest way to do that initially is for most an LLC, which is just a limited liability company.
Absolutely, and I know that different states sometimes have different entities, and you know everybody gets a piece of the pie. I know that there's the state incorporation, and then of course filing for your EIN. That's a separate process, but that's why you work with an attorney like Paige Hulse, who is an attorney and, as we said, also a business owner who focuses on bridging the gap between creative business owners and the legal world. And Paige, I'm really curious if I can count the number of times that I've heard from business owners that have contacted me after hearing an episode of Get Down to Business and said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so excited! I have my first opportunity to bring on a new client. I'm gonna write up that contract." And then they had that rude awakening that they may have just signed something that actually put them in a pretty challenging predicament. So, Paige, how do you sort of balance that excitement of maybe making your first hire or bringing on some of your new clients? What do you need to know about contracts?
That is such a good point. I'm glad that you bring that up. I know that contracts are not the most fun thing to talk about, but being forewarned means being forearmed. So it's always best to get this knowledge before we actually start interacting with our clients. It's kind of a dorky analogy. I say we want to get our structure in place first because that's the home of our business before we start letting people in through the doorway via our contracts. We want to make sure that that doorway is secure. As any contract attorney can tell you, I can invalidate one paragraph in an indemnity clause if it's missing a single word in some states. So when it comes to contracts, this is one of those areas where once you do it right the first time, work with somebody who is familiar with your industry, somebody who's familiar with contract law, and hopefully somebody who is willing to go to court and fight that contract on your behalf if the opportunity were to arise or the necessity were to arise. Because again, within a contract, every single word matters. And the way that a contract attorney looks at them is, I mean, it's a tapestry that comes together. One paragraph on page 6 can tie in with one paragraph on page 2, and we can get crafty with it. And so you just want to make sure that you invest in a strong one initially, so that we don't have to keep revisiting the same issues over and over again.
Absolutely. I'm chatting and learning from Paige Hulse from the Creative Law Shop. And Paige, a little known fact is I know that you are a calligrapher, but I have a hunch that with those long contracts, as you said, that might extend into page 6, 7, and 8. Hopefully, you're not doing them all by hand. That's the advantage of good systems. And I know you've done a handful or two of contracts. So we've talked a little bit on the call it the business side, meaning the contracts. Let's just say in terms of bringing on clients and business opportunities. I want to talk for a moment about employment. And we know that you have the opportunity to bring on an employee as what we would say a W-2, so sort of a standard employee. But then there's also an opportunity to bring people on as contractors under a 1099. What's the difference between the two as it relates to legal obligations?
So this is one of the few times this is a rare instance where you will hear me compliment the IRS website, because they have, if you Google this question on the IRS website, they break down pretty clearly the difference between a contractor and employee. For intents and purposes of this conversation, know that most entrepreneurs, especially in the startup phase, you're probably going to be hiring an independent contractor. This is somebody that you are assigning tasks, that they are helping you. Think of like a virtual assistant. Think of somebody who's helping run social media accounts, things like that. You're not actually paying them a specific paycheck every single day. They don't clock in at a certain time every single day. You probably haven't given them, for example, their computer that they use to perform the task. And in essence, they're not as reliant upon your business in order for their business to continue on. In fact, they usually have their own business. This is a very easy way. The easiest way for any entrepreneur to protect themselves in this instance is to have a separate, we want it in writing. So have an independent contractor agreement. If you have an employee, have an employment agreement. But if you ever blur that line between contractors and employees, the IRS could find you liable for things like back taxes and other fun things that we want to avoid. One of the easiest ways to save yourself from that predicament, again, is to just have that relationship solidified in black and white writing.
Absolutely. And it's those little things that's a perfect segue. It's those little things like the difference between a W-2 and a 1099, or things like making sure your website is in compliance with local privacy laws and so on. That's why you need an attorney, and we're not going to be able to cover absolutely everything in this conversation. Paige, hopefully you'll come back and we'll be able to continue our conversation about how you are making essentially the law more accessible for all sorts of businesses, but I know your passion is certainly in that creative space, which is the name of your firm, the Creative Law Shop. So Paige, in our final minute or so remaining, you are a business owner yourself. You're an entrepreneur. What's that one tip, that one bit of advice? And I'll caveat that by saying not a legal bit of advice, but something just in terms of running your own business that you want to make sure that our listeners sort of put into action in the week ahead.
Oh, that has lots come to mind. I would say initially follow that curiosity. As cliche as it sounds, if there's that nagging idea you just can't get rid of, follow it. And at the same time that you're doing that, make sure that you're not just haphazardly throwing spaghetti at the wall and not attacking without a plan. Once you think that you have a business idea, people thought I was insane when I started a template shop as a lawyer, but it was just one of those ways that I had an idea that could make the law more accessible to entrepreneurs worldwide. Attack it with a plan. Make sure that if you hire smart, you hire somebody that you can trust, cover that with an NDA, make sure that you're not just blindly trusting people to help you. Map out your business plan. And I will always recommend that you start with a due diligence search. Make sure that when you start that startup, you're not accidentally infringing upon anyone else's brand and walking into liability in that way as well.
Definitely. Paige Hulse from Paige Hulse Law and the Creative Law Shop, both tremendous resources. And I know our listeners will want to get in touch. Paige, real quick, can you tell us how we can get in contact with you?
You can find every contract I've ever written converted into a template at hello@shopcreativelaw.com or at shopcreativelaw.com. You can email me for trademark services at hello@pagehulse.com, and the website is pagehulse.com.
Fantastic. Paige Hulse, thanks so much for joining us. We got to squeeze in a quick break here on the show all about small business jobs and entrepreneurship. We'll be right back.